Our first guest tonight is ready to have summer over, and tomorrow's first day of fall camp is here and should take care of that. He covers the Cougars in depth as anybody on 24/7 Sports. Our pleasure to welcome Jeff Hansen back to the Wise Guys. Jeff,
hey,
good to see you.
How you guys doing tonight?
We're good. It's the night before. It's the night before. So what's the biggest question on your mind?
Man, Christmas Eve, right?
Yeah.
The biggest question that I have, first day of every fall camp, who's healthy, right? Who's hurt? You hear so many rumors throughout an off season of who's got what injury, and then fall camp is kind of the day, I guess the first day of camp is the first day that you really get to ask the coaches and have some level of transparency about injuries. You see who's on the field, you see who's in a boot. So for me, injuries is always the biggest thing. What do I look for that first day or two of camp is who's healthy and who's not healthy, and then what kind of rehab is it, right? Is it a real injury, or did somebody suffer a season-ending injury that we don't know about yet? I mean, those are the kinds of things I look for first.
Yeah. Are there any that you're going, okay, I know there was some concern about an injury that we know of. Is this one healed up or not? Are there any where you're like, okay, let's see how healthy somebody that we know was hurt is supposed to be back, and we're wondering how healthy they are? Anybody like that in your mind, Jeff?
Yeah, so I got three that I think are pretty big names that we all are all kind of on pins and needles waiting for. Ben Bywater first. I mean, there's been reports that he might miss some time. I hope that's not the case. The defense got considerably worse when he left the field, so Ben Bywater's a big one. L.J. Martin, obviously. I think L.J. kind of came on to somebody's show somewhere and kind of put some of those rumors to bed. But until he's on the field, it's a question mark.
Right.
And then Siale Acera. We haven't heard anything that should indicate that he's going to miss an extended amount of time. But those foot injuries like he had last year, foot injuries are goofy. I mean, those take a long time. And even if you're back on the field, you might not be truly back. We saw that from Taysom his senior year. He was healthy, he was on the field, but he was noticeably different those first few games. So what does Siale Acera look like? Because I think he's a guy that could be an extremely big piece on this defense this year, especially if Bywater misses time. Those three guys are the biggest question marks for me, and certainly there's others, but those are the three headliners.
We wanted to talk to you a little bit about this quarterback battle. With the offensive development during spring ball, Jake Retzlaff and Gerry Bohanon. One thing about Bohanon that was interesting, because Dave and I we've had them both on this show, and talked extensively, and with Bohanon, and it's Gerry. Did I say Gerry?
Sometimes it comes out Gerry, but it's Gerry.
It's Gerry. But with Gerry, he was saying, hey, I'm limited with throws. This was back a few months ago. And in spring ball, as I was watching him, I'm like, he just doesn't seem right. Like, this isn't the same guy I saw throwing the ball at Baylor with the same velocity. But I got to go, Gavin, my son, took me, and we went over and watched the quarterbacks work out with John Beck, the first four guys. And I went, oh, okay, this is different. This is not the guy I saw in spring ball. This guy's throwing an 18-yard comeback on a line over under the sideline. And so now I'm assuming he's healthy and going to be in a better place to compete in the fall. With that in your hip pocket from me watching him, what's your thought on this quarterback race? Is it a race, or is Jake the guy, or what do you think?
If you would have asked me a few weeks ago, Blaine, I would have said Jake's the guy. And that's what I've said throughout the summer because I kind of had the same impression that you had coming out of spring ball of just, he doesn't seem like he's the same guy. I heard some people close to the program told me a few weeks ago that they saw enough of him out of spring that by the end of spring ball, while nobody was naming Bohanon the starting quarterback. Nobody felt really comfortable that, hey, he's that guy, he's back. But they saw enough of him from the beginning of spring ball to the end to say, this looks more like rust than somebody who's lost his talent. And I heard a few weeks ago from some players, some guys who were there doing some of the player run stuff that Gerry looks different. And I think with that knowledge, and now, to hear you seeing it firsthand, right, Blaine, I think that it's a race. It's absolutely a race. And I think that Gerry should be the odds-on favorite. He's just so big. He's so strong. He brings so much experience to the offense. If Gerry's truly healthy, and until we all see it with our own eyes, it's a little bit of a question mark, but if Gerry Bohanon is truly healthy, I think you've got to look at him as absolutely a contender and maybe QB1 by mid-August.
We had Cody Epps on BYU Sports Nation this morning, and we asked him that question because Cody's been catching his passes and lockers right next to him, and he said he's healthy and throwing and zipping and ready to go. And I agree with you at 6'3", 235 as a running option with a quarterback who can make the throws, and all accounts is that he's making the throws. That's going to be a tough battle for Jake to win in a league that's so physical, and you have to have a mobile quarterback. Now, Jake's not mobile.
No, he can run around, yeah.
But at 6'3", 235, and we've had the running backs in here, and they say, hey, Bohanon's as fast as any of our running backs.
Yeah, he's one of the fastest guys. It's
kind of like Taysom.
It's interesting, too. Dave talks about that. In the chat right now, Zach Thornton says, hey, Jake's the second coming of Max Hall. Now, I'm assuming he's come from this perspective of leadership, because what we've seen from him from a confidence and leadership perspective has really been off the charts. Like, he's really kind of taken charge, especially this offseason. And all indications are that he has great command of this offense now. Didn't throw a pick in spring ball. So they don't have the exact same skill set. They're like, they bring different things to the table. And don't you kind of, Jeff, don't you have to have two quarterbacks these days? Don't you have to?
I mean, at least, right? I mean, nowadays, with the way that the game has evolved, you've got to have two. You've got to have three guys, I think, that you feel really comfortable with. So, yeah, no matter who QB2 is, it's still a critical role for BYU. And I agree. Jake has that leadership role. You can even see it in interviews. You can see the way that he interacts with the team. His teammates respond to him. I don't know that I'd go full on Max Hall, but I get Riley Nelson vibes from Jake Retzlaff. That like the guys just played a little bit harder, a little bit different. Routes were a little bit more crisp last year, and I think you see that from Jake Retzlaff for sure. I think you see that from Gerry Bohanon as well. That was one thing, whether it's USF or Baylor. People that I talked to when Gerry joined the program at both of those schools, they all said, hey, locker room guy, that's the first thing that came out of everybody's mouth, is how much of a natural leader that he can walk into any locker room, and there's just kind of a presence about him that everybody sort of responds to him. I think BYU has two natural leaders at quarterback, and that's a big deal.
BYU insider Jeff Hansen of 24/7 Sports is on the Wise Guys, presented by Brady Plus. All right, the offensive line is going to help whoever's the quarterback look really, really good or look like they're running for their lives. So what position battle are you looking for up front where once solidified, BYU can go toe-to-toe with anybody on the schedule?
For me, it's right tackle. There's a question about one of the guard spots, but I think there's enough guys in that competition that I feel good where BYU is at. But at right tackle, somebody really has to step up. Caleb Etienne should be that guy. He's got every physical tool that you want. He's got a ton of experience. He should be that guy. We just didn't see it enough last year. He was not consistent enough from a week-to-week basis that I feel really good penciling him in as my starter right now. Isaiah Jatta comes in from Colorado, and he didn't play much at Colorado, but there was a lot of dysfunction in Boulder. So we got to go back maybe 1 year before last year. And Isaiah Jatta was a near four-star coming out of Snow College, Auburn, Colorado. A bunch of SEC schools wanted him. He's got all the talent. At minimum, Jatta's going to push Etienne, and I think that's good. Somebody's going to rise to the top there. But whoever wins that battle and then how they perform those first few weeks of the season, that's going to be the biggest and most important thing for me along the offensive line.
Is Keim your other tackle and solid at that position as long as he stays healthy, right?
Yep.
It's interesting you mentioned Colorado and kind of dysfunctional, and I'm not using that word to describe BYU, but we had Connor Pay here on the show, and Connor just said, hey, everybody's better this year because we're more on the same page and we understand what we're doing. So I'm not saying dysfunctional, but it sounds like they did not play well as a unit last year in understanding what they were supposed to do. And Connor sat right here next to me, Jeff, and said, you will see a night and day difference in execution in what we're doing. Is this new line coach and new tight ends coach making a difference in that regard?
I think so. And if you look at what the coaches did immediately following the season, actions speak louder than words, right? And everybody said all the right things, but you look at what the coaches did. They didn't react and jump to the portal and add, 5-10 guys, right? They didn't make this mad dash that we need a ton of talent along the offensive line. They made a change at the coach. They brought in a new guy. They added a couple of players to fill key positions. But by and large, they're running it back with the same group, just with a different voice at the top. And I think what Connor Pay, I think what he talks about, and he's talked about it all offseason, is true. The group was talented last year. Talent wasn't the problem. They just didn't play well together for whatever reason. And there's a lot of reasons that it could be. I love hearing that from Connor. I think it's true. I think we're going to see it. I've never questioned the talent. I mean, the three, Braden Keim, Connor Pay, and Waylon Lapuaho, if you start with that foundation, you've got a pretty strong offensive line. Guys with a ton of experience, guys with a ton of talent. BYU's in a good spot from a talent perspective. I hope that it comes together better. And if you look at what TJ Woods has done, whenever he's had talent to work with, whether it was at Oregon State, Utah State, Wisconsin, he's produced elite-level results. His offensive lines have been phenomenal. It's been these places like Georgia Southern and UNLV where maybe he doesn't have that great talent to work with that his groups have struggled. I think everybody's groups are going to struggle at Georgia Southern and UNLV. Mm-hmm. And so now that he has more talent to work with, I expect to see more results closer to what TJ Woods did a few years ago earlier in his career.
Well, let's throw three other names at you. Hinckley Ropati, Miles Davis, and LJ Martin. If Martin, who we saw dinged up in spring, if he's not good to go out of the gate, is Ropati and Davis ready to carry that load behind that line with that quarterback?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that I would have warm fuzzies if those were the guys for 12 games right now. As long as LJ Martin comes back at some point early in the season or week one, we don't know to what extent he's injured.
Yeah.
Then I think BYU is going to be okay. I really like Hinckley Ropati. It's easy to kind of forget about him, but because he was hurt last year. But he's back. He's healthy. He's good. When BYU found him, it was back when Jeff Grimes was here. And they didn't really have room for a running back at that point. But Grimes saw him and said, that guy's a difference maker. He just has got to find that opportunity and find some help. But he's still the guy that BYU went and made room for in the midst of a scholarship crunch because he's that talented. Miles Davis has showed us in bursts what he's capable of. The guy I'm most excited for in that running back room is Pokai Hawonga. He's the real deal out of Timpview. He's a return missionary. He came back a little bit early, so he doesn't have quite that mission rust that other guys have to work through. I think between those three, BYU can withstand a few weeks without LJ Martin, but obviously the group's better if LJ's on the field.
And we're going to see what status LJ, where he's at. We're going to see it this week.
Yeah.
When we see him out on the field. And
he told us, right, Dave, he said, I'm going to be ready for fall camp.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? I'm ready, but I'm not cleared to hit. I'm ready, but, and so we don't quite know what that is, and we're hearing anywhere from ready for game one to, it could be a few weeks, but nobody's talking about him having a season-ending injury. They're saying it's just taking, the amount of time to get him so he can be cleared to hit. So I do think, where you're saying, Jeff, you're okay with those guys for a while, but you want to have LJ back in. That's going to happen, right? And you add some of these others. What I'm excited for is everybody else that's been on. So Hinckley's been on here. And I had not known him before. He was a highly intelligent, very bright young man. And then he sat next to me, and Dave was making fun of me because he's the only guy that's come on the show and make your arms look like they're miniature.
Yeah, he had guns.
He is put together. I would not want to tackle him for 4 quarters. I can tell you that. So
and the knock on him, Jeff, is his health. We didn't even see him last year because of the ACL.
Right.
And the year before that, he was dinged up a little bit, had a little trouble holding on to the football, and that's what kept him out early. But then we saw him be significant in the Boise State win, in the Utah Tech win, in the Stanford win, and then he won the bowl game.
Yeah, he just does so many things. I don't think he's ever going to be a 20, 25 carry a game type of a guy, but he does so many different things. He can handle the screen game really well, even though he's built so well. He's short, but he's pretty good in pass protection, so I think he's a weapon there. I really like Hinckley Ropati. I think he's a pretty well-rounded back. He's just got to stay healthy, and if he can, I think he'll surprise some people. And I know that he's won a lot of people over in the locker room. And when you listen to his teammates talk about him, they talk about him a little bit differently than they do some other guys. There's a lot of belief that he can be a very big part of BYU's offense this year.
Jeff, you mentioned Pokai Honga at running back. Earl Carr on our chat says what freshman from this last class could see the field this year? And I realize he's not from, when we talk about him, he's not from this last class because he's back from a mission. Is there anybody that is going to be a true freshman this fall that in your mind, I can think of one, I want to hear what you think, that I think will see the field. Any that you are going, yeah, I think this person will see the field.
Yeah, I think Faletau Satuala will eventually. He's just too talented not to be everything he does. I remember I first saw him as a sophomore at Bountiful, and it was, this guy's different. And he only got better and better and better. He's also just kind of that natural leader that we talked about with some of these other guys.
Yes.
Faletau Satuala, he's going to find a way to impact the game. I think at minimum he plays special teams in that first few weeks of the season and eventually works his way into the rotation. Ephraim Asiata is an interesting one. He's got the talent. There's two things. In order for a freshman to get on the field, you got to have talent and you got to have opportunity, right? There's opportunity for Ephraim Asiata to pass rush, right? BYU needs a pass rusher. And so I think Asiata will find a way to impact games in obvious pass rushing situations really early on. I don't think he's ready to be a 3-down type of a guy. So I think of, early days, that freshman Sione Takitaki, that he couldn't stay on the field for 3 downs, but when he was on the field in those passing situations, Takitaki made an impact early on in his career. I think Asiata kind of fits that same mold. I guess he's not a freshman, but I'm really excited for what Sonny Tuwala can do as well. I think when he signed, I want to say he was about 255, 260 pounds. He's officially listed at 280 pounds on the updated roster. I think he's a little bit bigger than that. Sonny Tuwala could end up sliding inside and not playing defensive end, but playing that defensive tackle spot, bring that big frame, that rugby background. He's super athletic. People have compared him to kind of a Ziggy. I mean, he's just a freak athlete. I think because of the need on defensive line, Sonny Tuwala is another guy that could find the field early.
Yeah, I love that one, Jeff. And not a freshman, as you mentioned, because he transferred in with 1 year of junior college experience, started playing football late because he's a kid from down the South Pacific, Australia, I believe. But I saw him in the weight room, and I didn't know who he was. And I literally stopped and went, oh, my goodness, who is that guy? Because he was probably 265 at the time. Shredded like a defensive back at 265, and have it on good authority that Gary Anderson said before he's done he'll be a 305-pound 3-technique defensive tackle and a potential first-round draft pick.
Okay, let's take that.
Yeah.
And I trust Gary Anderson's opinion on people. So
I think he's got that talent in him, and what I love about that is if you look at what Sione Pua has done throughout his career, he's really good with defensive tackles. He's really, really good with defensive ends who learn to play defensive.
Yes.
And that is good. I mean, he's got that. He's just twitchy. He's not just a big body who's going to sit in a gap. He's going to make a difference from the interior of the defensive line. Sonny Tuwala is the real deal. We're not talking about him collectively enough yet, but I think as soon as we start to see him play, everybody's going to be talking about it.
So here's my one freshman for you, Jeff. So mark this one down. Tommy Prasis.
Yeah.
I will not be surprised if Tommy is not starting at safety before the end of the year.
I think I agree with that. It was Ben Criddle was the first guy who told me that back in, it was just after signing day, maybe even before spring ball, and I thought he was crazy, but I think it's true. I think at minimum he's in the 2 deep. Jay Hill loves him. He's just such a smart football player. And if you go back to Jay Hill's time at Weber State, those safeties need to be really smart in this defensive scheme. They're kind of that captain who helps get everybody in the right spot. And Tommy Prasis has the trust of Jay Hill, and that's going to – he's got all the athletic tools, all that stuff. But if you have the trust of Jay Hill and you play the safety spot, that's going to go a long ways, and that will earn him playing time.
Yeah, he's a really twitchy, really – like his change of direction – his ability to stop out of a back pedal and break on the ball, his ball skills, like all those things that you kind of can't teach that you just come to the game with. When you watch him, and as I watched him through spring ball, my eyes just kept going to him like, whoa, this dude can just flat out play. And then I talked to Jay and talked to Gavin, and they're like, oh, he's a very instinctive football player. For a young guy, he's way beyond. And I'm thinking, this guy could get on the field. So he's somebody for everybody to watch. Sounds like you agree with that as well, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I do. I think Tommy Prasis is the real deal.
Our live stream's hopping tonight. Keith, hello from Kuwait, out on a run at 3:30
Keith Robertson.
a.m. He says, haha, it's the only time cool enough over here to get out for a run. Thanks for making it go by quickly. Love your stuff, Jeff. So there's a shout out from Kuwait, Jeff, as we continue a few more minutes with Jeff Hansen of 24/7 Sports. Live on the Wise Guys on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and wiseguys.com. How much pressure is on offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick to improve offensive production in every category this season?
A ton. The most amount of pressure you could think of, right? BYU is quarterback U. BYU, that's offensive football. And what we saw last year was not BYU football at all. And I think BYU fans, the patience for maybe a defense that needs to turn it around, there's maybe a couple years worth of a leash there, a couple years worth of patience. I don't think that flies on the offensive side of the ball. There's high expectations, and they've got to be met right away. And the biggest thing is there's not a lot of confidence yet in the quarterback room. And so I think that's been eating at fans throughout the offseason, right? They bring in Gerry Bohanon, they bring back Retzlaff, and then they add a guy out of Utah State who I love. I love McKay Hilston. I think he's a dog and going to be a starter at BYU at some point. But none of those are those flashy 4 or 5-star type guys. None of the guys, like Keaton Slovis came in, and on day one, he was the quarterback. That everybody knew that. That isn't the case this year. And so I think there's this uneasiness about the quarterback situation, and the offense was just not good enough last year. I think that Aaron Roderick has to turn it around really quickly, or those boo birds, they get really loud really fast.
Quarterback play is so important.
Yeah.
I keep telling Dave, and I tell him I'm not biased. It's the most important position in any sport. The most important position in any sport. So we'll just leave it at that. Simon Foos checking in from Highland Park, Illinois, saying go Cougs. And
he's got to be a Cubs fan, too.
Yeah, he must be a Cubs. Defensively, Jeff, what are you thinking about on defense? What are you watching for that's going to be an indicator of either success or failure on that side of the ball?
Well, we talked about Sonny Tuala hopefully playing, inside at some point. That's where my eyes are going to be right away, is the interior of the defensive line. A ton of emphasis on pass rushers, right? Guys like Kenny Lau, Fonahema, Asiata we talked about. Tuala was a defensive end at one point. A ton of emphasis on pass rushers in the recruiting class. Not a lot on the inside, and one of those guys who was brought in, Danny Saili, he's already gone. So really the only guy that is net new to the defensive tackle room, at least on paper, is Luke Tuamalatai. That's an area that BYU struggled against the run. They got pushed around, especially in the back half of the season, and they're kind of running it back with the same group. I'm really anxious to see what they do there. I like some of the players there, and I think there's some edge guys like Tuala, maybe Blake Mangelson, who could slide inside and end up playing defensive tackle. But until we see that with our own eyes, and until we see them, really lock down a run game and control a line of scrimmage, the interior of the defensive line is for me, the biggest question mark. I really like John Nelson. I hope he's able to stay healthy. It's kind of been a theme that we're talking about with everybody. They got to stay healthy. If John Nelson can stay healthy, he's very, very good. And David Latu, I think, started to come on a little bit towards the end of the season last year. Beyond that, it's a lot of unknowns and question marks and maybe new positions. That defensive tackle spot is, I think, all eyes on the defense should be on the defensive tackle spot. Aside from that, I think BYU's got answers to their questions. We don't know what the answers are at defensive tackle yet.
Phil is with us from Cedar Park, Texas, on the stream tonight. Phil, thank you. All right. We're going to have you our 5 questions with Jeff Hansen. He's already done the 5 questions.
So we give him 5 different ones.
So we're
now.
he's going to roll out his top 5 Cougars in the NFL.
Right on.
And before we get to that, and Jen Rockwood is going to join us in just a moment, the BYU women's soccer coach. Opening night, Southern Illinois, August 31st. What do you expect to see from BYU?
I think Aaron Roderick is going to make a point to score a lot of points. They have to. They've got to find some answers at the quarterback spot, so I expect to see BYU. I don't think it's going to be a super vanilla game plan. I don't think they're going to hold anything back. And I expect to see a dominating performance, because that's what BYU should do against a team like Southern Illinois. And I think that the coaching staff, they've heard all of the frustrations all year. They don't like the sour taste from the end of last year. I think there will be some frustrations taken out on Southern Illinois in that opening game.
Okay, that's a good forecast. That is a good forecast. 5 questions for Jeff. Tonight's 5 questions presented by Strategy Square, delivering connection, clarity, and confidence in business and marketing strategies. We've asked you to come prepared to name your top 5 Cougars in the NFL, starting at 5. And then taking us to Fred Warner at 1, even though I haven't seen your list.
We haven't seen the list, but as soon as we start in the NFL, we're like, he's the best player in his position. He might be the best defender in the league. Jeff can't come up with anybody but him, can he?
All right, number 5. What do you got?
So one we're all agreed on, but we'll do 5, 4, 3, and 2.
Number 5, I went back and forth a little bit. I landed on Taysom at number 5. I could have gone with Kyle Van Noy. I made an argument for Tyler Algier, but I landed on Taysom at number 5. And he just does so much, right? Yeah. If he was able to play more plays, I think he catapults up this list. But that role, he's just such a different player, and he has such an impact on games. I've got Taysom at 5.
I think the surprise might be that Taysom's not 4, 3,
right,
or 2.
But I like it. He's got to be in that top 5, so I love it. How about 4?
I've got Mike Davis. I mean, look, if you are he was a cornerback 1 for a long time with the Chargers. He picks up another contract, walks into a starting spot. In today's NFL, to be a starting cornerback for multiple teams, I think that speaks really, really highly of what Mike Davis brings to teams and how he's viewed by general managers and coaches in the NFL. I think he's underrated by BYU fans. I got Mike Davis.
Cornerbacks in the NFL are some of the greatest athletes, period, in any sport, and Michael Davis is one of those. So, number 3.
Number 3, I've got Blake Freeland at number 3. I think this is a big year for Blake. He emerged as a starter at the end of last year. I think he locks that down and is one of the better offensive linemen, certainly in that division and definitely with the Colts. I think Blake Freeland's got all the tools to be very, very good, and this is the year we start to see that.
I love it.
Together.
Former high school quarterback, now NFL left tackle. You got to love that.
Jeff, does Slovis have any chance of getting a roster spot with the Colts?
Man, I would love to say yes. I just don't see it. With a young guy and Anthony Richardson already, I don't know if they have another young guy on that roster at quarterback.
Okay.
Can we all just write in who number 1 is right now?
Well, he might throw a surprise.
Okay, are you going to throw us a surprise? Who's number 2?
Davis.
I would love to throw you a surprise, but I think we all have the same 1 and 2.
Okay.
It's Puka at 2 and Fred Warner at 1.
Yeah, that's exactly what we had.
Now, those 2 are on 2 very different journeys. They're on offense and defense. One's brand new, and the other has solidified himself. But those are 2 big reps for BYU football.
Yeah, 2 very, very good players. In fact, you guys may not have caught this. I think it just happened right before I joined the show. The NFL's doing their top 100 players. I haven't seen where Fred lands. I assume he's in the top 10. Maybe he already was named in the top 10. But Puka Nacua checked in at number 33 on the NFL's list.
Wow.
So.
It's interesting. BYU's representation in the NFL, there's some really visible names.
Yeah.
Jamal Williams, even though he has a little less of a role than he's really visible in the league. Puka's crazy visible. Fred's recognized as the best defender in the league. And Taysom Hill is unbelievably visible. So it's good for BYU's name to have those kinds of players in the league.
Absolutely. I did think about throwing you guys for a loop and saying, hey, number 1's really Andy Reid, but I didn't go that route.
We wouldn't have disputed that.
We wouldn't have disputed, but he's not playing.
5 questions presented by Strategy Square. Jeff, where can folks find your stuff?
Check us out at CougarSportsInsider.com. I mean, we're covering BYU recruiting and BYU football all year long, basketball as well. But recruiting is what we do. So if you care about that, check us out. CougarSportsInsider.com.
We do care about it. That's why we have you on more than once. So
hey, we'll see you at practice.
Thanks, Jeff.
Awesome. Appreciate
Jeff
you guys.
Hansen, 24/7 Sports, and really knows his stuff.
Yeah,
and so
he's
we
great.
love having him on our show.
Yep.
A lot of people think we know our stuff, and we think we do, and then we bring on Jeff, and then it just helps us.
We just fool ourselves
roll
sometimes.
it all out.
So.